When Chinese people gather for a meal, whether at home or in a restaurant, we usually gather around the table to eat Chinese food. The result of this intimate communication is that the unique bacteria of each person are transmitted to people at the same table. And people naturally do not feel the danger when they are happy and drunk. Of course, we are only the inheritors and promoters of the tradition, and we are not responsible for the negative consequences of this tradition, but we are unknowingly putting ourselves in danger. Also, this kind of family-style serving is one of the important elements of traditional Chinese food culture. In our current perspective, it's not good. The history of this tradition is not as old as we think. With a little over 1,000 years of existence, a much older tradition of China is more common in the Western world, and that is the authentic individual serving. For the Chinese, the individual serving is not what is important. Many thousands of years, literature and painting have a detailed and vivid description of the ancient Chinese food culture. In ancient times, because of limited food, to ensure that each member of the group can survive, the ancestors have to divide the food into several small portions, one for each person, to a certain extent. This way of production and living also made the needs of people in terms of security and collective work and uniform distribution made it easier for people to develop a sense of mutual trust and interdependence. Coupled with the poor living condition at that time, there are no decent eating utensils. They get a share of the food after their own, generally find a place to stand or sit on the ground to eat. Nothing etiquette. Individual serving so naturally emerged, to some extent, the last resort. After the end of the Neolithic period in China and in the Bronze Age, productivity developed considerably. Surplus food increased, and there were many innovations in tableware. But the Chinese still practiced individual serving. The eater is generally sitting on a mat on the floor, with his or her upper body erect, knees on the mat, and hips erect or on the feet. The host and the guests are distinguished by their orientation and sitting position, and each person has a small low table in front of him or her with his or her food. One table serving per person. This ritualistic way of eating is very much in line with the need to distinguish between the noble and the lowly after entering the class society. In such a situation, it is not convenient to gather many people around for a meal. People of different status did not have the same type of amount of food in front of them, and the utensils used were different as well. For example, when the ruler and his minister ate together, the number of Asian saucepans and Asian bowls used from the king to the lower ranking officials decreased in the descending order. When the elders and the young eat together, the number of Asian plates is distributed according to age, with the elders having more and the young have less. This individual serving continued until the Song dynasty, when it disappeared completely. In primitive clan communal societies, human beings follow the common principle, the communal possession and equal distribution of possessions. The painted wooden dining table 4,500 years ago unearthed at the Taosi site. It is the earliest piece of dining table that can be seen in China today. It refers to the history of the dining table 4,500 years ago in the Longshan culture, but also indicates the origin of the individual serving in ancient China. The development of the Asian individual serving is closely linked with the small dining table. The small dining table is the production of the ritualized individual serving. During the Shang, Zhou, Qin, and Han dynasty, people sat on the mat on the floor and used the low dining table to eat. limiting the scope of the meal, and each person ate the food in front of him or her individually to form an individual serving. During the Wei Jin and North Song dynasty, there was social unrest and frequent warfare. The traditional culture since the Shang and Zhou dynasty gets strong shocks, and the hierarchy was no longer strict. People began to eat at the same table, and with the increase in contact with the minorities, the nomad people entered the central plans more often. The cultures blended. The costumes, furniture, and the eating utensils were constantly innovated, and the daily life of the people was influenced by them. And they became more open-minded. During the Sui and Tang dynasty, the individual serving had been phased out. The appearance of high tables and chairs for people who were keen on banquet activities to provide a material basis. There were individual dishes at the same table scene, just a food culture that does the individual serving and looks like the family-style serving transitional period. The picture depicts a banquet scene from the early Tang dynasty. Like this one from Xi'an, in the middle of the painting is a large dining table. With benches on three sides and of the table, people sit around the table. The steamed food and cutlery were set in front of each person. To facilitate eating, here is a pole at the end of the table. They do not seem to accustomed to putting their legs down on the ground. There are still people sitting in a cross-legged posture. Turned to the middle of the Tang dynasty, the ladies in this painting were sitting in much the same way as we are today. And they were sitting around a large dining table in the center, sipping tea and singing, with the lady holding a long-handled spoon, serving them drinks from a large basin. The difference is that what they were sitting on is not the big benches that several people shared, but a pretty delicacy single chair. From about the late Tang dynasty, both in the palace and among the people, family-style serving with high chairs and large tables have been very general. Of course, the change was not instantaneous, and during the 5 dynasty and 10 kingdoms period, the individual serving did not entirely disappear. Han banquet map is a long picture in which Han Xizai and 4 other officials fast while listening to pipa music. There is one large and one small dining table, with Han Xizai and 3 other officials sitting around the large table and one official sitting alone at the small table. The dining people sit close to each other but still do the individual serving. The dining style was changing, and also in the transitional period. The changes in the way of dining are closely related to the changes in the dining table. Because of the different forms of society, people have different eating habits, promoting the development of the dining table. On the other hand, as the development of the dining table has opened up to the possibility for changes in the way meals are served, it applies equally to the contemporary situation. Today's Chinese dining table affirms more than words. The dining table is not limited to the rigid shape according to space or user needs and changes. That is all for today. If you have something to say, please leave a comment in the comment section. And please click the subscribe button. And don't forget the little bell. Thank you very much.